Hey everybody, welcome to season 5 of What's IGN Crushing On. I'm Karen Welby Solomon and I'm your host, and we're here to talk about what's hot in pop culture. Hey everyone, it's Karen and welcome to episode 7. Today we have a little bit of a different episode for you because of load shedding, our greatest friend and worst enemy. Load shedding has made it almost impossible for us to record, so we're a little bit late this week and I'm all on my lonesome, so which means no pop culture chat. We're just going to get right into the interview. Today's interview is with Riaad Moosa. Listeners of Crushing On will remember that Riaad was on the show last year promoting his film New Material. He's back this week to talk about his world tour and just to catch up a bit and, just talk a bit about where comedy is at and where comedy is going and how the pandemic affected everything. It was a very interesting chat, especially for comedy lovers. But yeah, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Listen to our chat with Riaad Moosa.
Progress.
Hi Riaad, welcome back to the podcast. How have you been?
Yes, I've been great. I've been sitting here waiting for since the last time we spoke, which was I think a year ago. And I've been sitting here, bated breath, for the follow-up. So, finally you called back and I'm here. And I feel very welcomed to be back.
So wait, okay. Other than you sitting there, a lot has changed since the last time we spoke. So what's new? What's been going on?
A lot of gray hairs. Lots of gray hairs since then. No, I think transitioning into from the virtual world to the live world, but retaining some virtual aspects is what I've decided to do. So I've embarked on this world tour. Okay, the world tour being mainly South Africa and Dubai, which will be live, and then a virtual world tour where I will do virtual shows from my studio, but it's catering to all the various time zones. So I've got a Europe and UK time zone. I've got an Australia time zone, United States East Coast time zone. I've got a Singapore, Malaysia, China time zone, India time zone. And I've been selling tickets. So far, I got 3 people from China.
It's amazing.
Going to be at my show. I'm going to be streaming. For America, I have to wake up at 2 or I have to perform at 2 o'clock. So on the same day, I can perform in Australia and in America. Australia, I'm going to perform at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, midday, because that's 8 p.m. Australia time. So I'll do a show, and then the evening at around 8 p.m. my time, I'll do a actual live show. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to do a show for the East Coast of the United States. That's what I've decided to do.
So when you sleep,
I've started. I won't sleep that. I don't know if I'll sleep after that. And then we'll be up very early. No, it'll be a Saturday, so I won't have to wake up for the kids to take them to school. So it'll be cool, because usually we wake up around 5:45 for that, and then get ready, make lunches. My son is at madrasa by 7 o'clock because he's doing hif. And then my kids would drive to Vida. We get coffee and hot chocolate and chocolate croissants. And then we drive to school, drop them, come back home.
Gosh.
And then there's still another child at home. So there's just busyness. I have a lot of coffee.
I'm tired listening to this.
Right. Yeah, exhausted by that, A lot of coffee. Should be drugs, should be other drugs of an amphetamine nature, but there's not, because that's haram. But coffee is fine. I think coffee is okay. It does give me anxiety though, and I have a tremor. But it's good. I can manage. I can manage.
So tell me,
not really.
So how is
I'm trying.
Your subject matter changed? Would you say Like, what can we expect in the new show?
This show essentially is the show that I was gonna tour with,
Mm.
plus everything that happened with the pandemic. Because like I've got five, this is my fifth, will be my fifth comedy special. Comedy special. Can't even speak properly. Comedy special. And so I had Strictly Allowed was the first one, then it was For the Baraka, Doctor's Orders, Life Begins, and then Not a Nice Guy, which was the tour. And I was gonna tour everywhere with that, and then the pandemic hit. And then so that show was not filmed. It should have been filmed. I should have toured throughout the country with that. So essentially, I'm going to do that. That show has evolved, incorporating what happened, in the past few years. And I have, and that's another reason why I'm not performing in Cape Town, because I actually did that show in Cape Town a while ago. It is different now, and it's better. But I've decided now, okay, at least go somewhere else first. And then if people really want to see the show, then I'll come back here and do it in Cape Town. But I didn't get a chance to perform it in different parts of the country and the world, so I'm going to do that and hopefully be able to film it at some point, and then that will be out there. It's essentially the subject matters based on the fact that as I've gotten older, I've become more irritated with people, and I'm generally a nice guy. I'm known to be a nice guy, and I'm like a kind-hearted individual, right? But now that's not the same. It's not the case anymore. Like I act like I'm kind-hearted, but in reality, I'm in my heart, I'm like this, but I act a certain way. Before, my heart was kind, and I was like, I actually had a lot of care to give to people, but now I just act that way. But in reality, I'm and my brain has to tell my heart, listen here, brah, there are better ways to act, right? And then I have to override my heart. And I don't know if that's got to do with getting older, the stress of the pandemic, just having to live through a chaotic time. I don't know, but that is the core of that, wanting to know what's right and wrong, and being confused about what's right and what's right and what's wrong, because everybody wants to do the right thing, but a lot of times we don't know exactly what the right thing is, and there are difference of opinions and all of that. So this is a very sort of real subject matter that people have to deal with, but philosophical foundation. But then there's a whole lot of jokes built up on that anxiety, which is essentially what comedy is supposed to be. It's supposed to take something stressful and release the tension.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just hearing a train go past. I'm like, I just hope this train doesn't make a lot of noise.
I thought someone was like, there's a butcher or something. So, like cutting meat in the background.
Oh gosh.
But it's a train.
Yeah, it's a train. So last time we spoke, you were I mean, it was still hard, or not even hard, but it was still pretty much locked down. And you were saying that you kind of missed doing the live shows because the lols and the emojis on Zoom didn't cut it. So how did it feel going back to doing live shows again?
No, I've got so much gratitude now. Like when I perform now, I am filled. I'm filled with appreciation for. I always loved my job, and I appreciated my job, but there's a newfound appreciation and gratitude just for every moment and every aspect of my career. Even the moments waiting before I perform, getting dressed to perform, traveling to the gig, meeting people after the show, and obviously just the performance aspect, that the real interaction where you can feed off the body language of people, because that's essentially what's missing, in a virtual show. The communication doesn't have the body language aspect. It's not in a real time. The laughter is what connects us in the performance. So stand-up comedy needs that. And when I do a virtual show, for example, I have to manufacture that. And so what I will do when I do my virtual shows, I will perform as if I feel the laughs, and I'll have to overcompensate, and it becomes much harder for me, right? Whereas when I do a show and people enjoy, they give me a lot of energy, and that sort of spurs me on. Whereas in a virtual show, all of that's non-existent, and I sort of have to manufacture that, because how I perform impacts on how the people enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
If I start getting into the idea or getting into the narrative, or start listening to my thoughts, oh, I think it's not working, I'm dying, and then that impacts on my performance, all of a sudden the way in which, like, I'm telling my jokes is not up to scratch, and so I have to create all of that by myself. But I usually find that if I've practiced the show, or I've done it many, many, many times, then I can, pass. But definitely, like, a virtual performance doesn't compare to a live performance, and it's very special. Every time I perform, I tell at the end of the show, I gush a little bit for the audience and express how much I appreciate them. And usually some people go, oh, right, and then they clap, yeah, and then we leave. But it's true. I really appreciate going back to the live performance.
So, other than like the subject matter of your comedy, have you noticed your comedy style changing, like pre and post pandemic?
Yeah, so it is just a little bit, I think, harsher, more mature. It's representative of how I feel. So as you get older, generally, the foundation of your comedy becomes more introspective. So when you start, you talk about general things that everybody knows, and the subject matter is, for example, predominantly drawn from the news and what is happening outside you, whereas an older guy generally draws from what's happening inside as a foundation. And that also adds a unique aspect to your comedy, because as you get older, I don't want to say become more wise, but you become more philosophical, and you start to question meaning and what's the point, and all of these things, because you've loved life and you've had a lot of experiences, and trying to assimilate that into your comedy is what tends to happen. And also to add an element of being a unique performer is also important, because you don't want other people to, like, take your jokes. So if I'm going to just do topical material, anybody can take that. But if I'm talking about myself specifically, it's very difficult for people to steal jokes, because I'm talking about my unique experiences. And then it's like it can, and you just hope that people identify. And a lot of times people do, family people, because a lot of my material is based on my family, my kids, my wife, but also in terms of the general feeling at the time, and it is a chaotic time, and everybody is feeling that. So I would say that it's not very different, other than the fact that there's a maturity element to it. But that has been a trend as I've gotten older. You would see that within my comedy, how it started to how it is now. It's much more layered. Some people also, like, a lot of times people like the earlier stuff, but generally performers, they become more refined over time, and your art form becomes more detailed and complicated. And sometimes the general public may not like that as much. Like when a musician or a band comes out with their first album, and then people love it, and it's very popular. And then they think in their mind they're getting better over time, and they offer something musically that's actually of a higher quality, it doesn't necessarily connect with that audience as much, even though it's a better product. So that, I think, is the nature of getting older. But at the same time, uh, it's that balance between you growing and the audience growing with you. You have to respect the audience and bring them along for the ride. And I think a lot of people still continue to say, identify with a lot of stuff that you're saying. And I think it's just because a reflection of, going through similar experiences, people of similar age and similar responsibilities. And I just sort of reflect that in my comedy.
So, but like on that, during the pandemic, you were obviously very active on social media. So have you seen like a lot of younger fans starting to
Well, now I'm seeing a lot because I'm putting a lot of my content out. And like, so for example, on TikTok, I'm like massive now. Like,
Yeah.
I just put out content. Just recently, I started putting out little clips.
A scene.
And yes. And now all of a sudden, my friends' kids are saying, wow, they're saying they liking my material. And that's so interesting to me. All of a sudden, they start knowing who I am. But that's also based on older jokes, things from back in the day. So they're not necessarily going to identify with the maturer stuff, that the older people relate to. But at the same time, it's an interesting world, negotiating the balance between virtual and digital and live. And I do want to venture more into the virtual world because, like, I'm also starting, inspired by you, among other people, starting my own podcast.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've seen, I've got I haven't put my own podcast. I just filmed it yesterday, which is just me talking to the camera. It's a weird thing to do a podcast on your own, and just speaking randomly your random thoughts, which is why I was asking about Anchor FM and how I upload that and all of those things, because I'm planning to do that. And then I also have a collaborative podcast with Stuart Taylor, Nick Rabinowitz, and Seiji Moghadi, right? And we're calling that Everybody Loves Dad, because we're all father comedians of a certain age. And so we're going to be just, talking about anything under the sun. But that's what we have in common. And being comedians and, dads, hashtag dad life and comic life. and that's what we're going to be doing. So this balance between, putting out the digital content and then doing your live stuff. I like that aspect because you sort of control your own marketing. It's an interesting thing, but you don't want it to become too labor intensive. So it has to be done in a clever way. So for us old guys, we've got a lot of kids and have to, spend most of our time, running errands and picking
Make the kids do it
and doing all of those things. Oh, soon, we're teaching the older ones. To help out, and but in that life, so the podcast system works quite well because you sit for an hour, make loads of jokes, and then you have a lot of content which you just need to put out there, as opposed to now spending hours and hours refining, this amazing amount of material, and then putting that out there. But I am putting it out there, and I just need to find some sort of balance and a good system in my content development. But I'm trying out stuff. So this virtual world tour is a new thing. I'm trying that out. Like, nobody else is doing that thing. They tried it in the pandemic, but I'm playing around with this idea and seeing if there's any potential in.
So is this how you see like comedy moving forward? Because I know that I've also been waiting for more South African comedian podcasts, because I feel like every American comedian has a podcast, and I'm like, there's such a rich space here for that. But seeing this kind of like this dual work between virtual and online, like changing the way we just, because I mean, before we just used to see comedians in comedy clubs and in like theaters and that sort of thing. So is that
Yeah,
what you see happening?
I think it's going to happen
Mm.
because it just needs to get people need to get the ball rolling. A few comedians are doing. Obviously, Simi has been doing his podcast for a long time,
Yeah.
and then you've got was it Tats Nkonzo, um, and Loiso Madinga and Robbie Collins were doing a podcast. I don't know if they're still continuing with that, and I know that we are going to do it
Mm.
without a doubt. The four of us, um, just make it a regular thing. Um, and I do think that people are going to figure out that that is a good way to connect with your audience. The difficulty with us is we don't have, I don't think we have that much. I don't think there's enough people,
Mm.
and the market is that big. So
Mm.
I don't know. So it's more like we're exploring and seeing what sort of returns people are getting. So a lot of people are like, for example, Alfred Adrian is doing well online, and he sort of, pushed well into that space. So a lot of people will be looking at that and following that example as well.
Mm.
But you got to have the dedication because it's not
Yeah.
not easy to do things like that. And comedians are lazy. Comedians are very lazy, right? And so the guys who are gonna work very, very hard at it or do those things are gonna reap the rewards.
Mm.
But because most comedians aren't hardworking.
So to remind us again, like your tour dates.
So I'm starting this weekend,
Okay.
KZN. I'm doing Empanjanai. I'm doing Durban, Umzinto. The following week, I'm going to Dubai. And then the following week after that, I think I'm doing Clarksdorp and Mafikeng. And then after that, I'm going to do, I think it's Johannesburg again. I'm doing Lenasia. It's almost every weekend. They must just follow go
Mm.
on my social media or my website. My website will give you the entire list, and you'll be able to see basically my live shows and my virtual shows. And
Okay.
I put all that out there, and then people can just sort of click and decide. Everything is out there, and I'm going to be constantly marketing the thing because I mean that's the challenge at this point with so much content. How do you remain relevant? It's like you actually have to do a lot of posting, and you have to do a lot to create a lot of content. But it's nice. It's fun if you have a good system.
Mm. So okay, I don't think I asked you this question the last time you were here, but this is what we usually ask everybody. But who was your
Yes.
first celebrity crush?
Who's the first celebrity that I? Who's the celebrity that I go gaga over?
Well, that your
Like
first one, like when you were like young still. Or you can do now. I mean, shame. It's alright.
no, when I was my first celebrity crush. I would say like even back in the day, like not my crush, but the person who
Mm.
I can mention a whole lot of you know good looking women. As a teenager, that would be my crush, but I
Mm.
don't want to like as a person I respected in terms
Okay.
of their comedic ability
You
was
can
Will Smith,
answer. Okay. Brilliant.
right?
Yeah.
So in a non-horny teenager version of that answer
Uh,
is that the person that I thought was cool was Will Smith, and he has let me down. And like I'm one of those people who absolutely loved Will Smith, but I can't. When I look at anything he does now, it's like, ugh, ugh. Like I just feel the bile and the gastric acid coming up. It's very troubling, and I try to be understanding, but I think when he slapped Chris Rock, it just showed the lack of authenticity, and everything that he was purporting to believe was purely a facade, because he really communicated that he understood the world of fame.
mm.
He really communicated that he understood how to place fame within the context of being a real down-to-earth person and being able to negotiate, this dichotomy of living, where your ego is built up and you're supposedly so massive, and remaining in a space where you're able to add value to people and understanding the philosophies how to live like that. But the fact that he was able to do something so drastic, it just showed that was an aspiration. It wasn't I think it is. I think he wants to be that way, but his real self is so far from that. Or it's just that there's no one who he wants to be more perfect than any person can be. Okay. Whereas Chris Rock was authentic. He got slapped by Will Smith at the Oscars, and you're like, Will Smith just slapped the shit out of me. like was who he was before and after, and just Will Smith is no longer, who we thought he was. I actually don't know how to. It's sort of really affected. Because I used to love Will Smith because, in the sense, a lot of his philosophies, I identify with a lot of the things that he went through, right? Just at a much lower level. Like everything he wrote about in this book, Will, identify a lot of it just there, near the ground, right? But I get what he's talking about. And there were so many philosophies and wise things that came out of his mouth, right? But I guess, we all have a shadow. We all have a dark side. I think an important aspect of this is that, don't purport to be more perfect than you actually are, and be very, very wary about espousing and communicating perfectionism, because you're not like that. And so I was just affected. I was affected by it. But he was one of my first celebrity, non-female halal crushes.
Halal crushes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Riaad. This was a lovely chat. It was great speaking to you again.
Thank you. And then I'll let you know about Cape Town.
Yes, please.
Unbanned from the Baxter. Yeah.
That was our chat with Riaad Moosa. Riaad is a comedian, an actor, a writer, and he's embarking on a world tour. And you can find out which dates you can watch him on his website, which we will link to in the show notes, as well as on his social media pages. So that's all from us this week. Next week we'll be back. Leanne will be back. The Pop Culture Chat will be back. Crushing On will be back. And it'll be a bumper episode all about Showmax's new epic fantasy TV series, Blood Psalms. So stay tuned. Next week we'll be bringing you all the juice. See you then. Me, you can find at Karen Walby on Instagram, at Karen Walbys with an S on Twitter, and sign up for my newsletter, Wildest Dreams, at wildestdreams.substack.com. The podcast can be found at Crushing On Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can find us at What's IGN Crushing On YouTube, and you can find more information about this and all our other episodes on our website, crushingonpodcast.com. Send any feedback to mail@crushingonpodcast.com, and you can send us voice notes at +27 78 362 2566. Join our Facebook group, Crushing On Club, where we chat about the show, celebrity news, recommendations, the whole shebang. The show is produced by me, Karen, as well as Rebecca Barches and Leanne Phillipson. The show is edited by Rebecca Barches. Our logo was designed by Nathifa Maroof, and the show was created in partnership with IGN Africa. If you like the show, tell everyone that you can, any way that you can. Keep up to date with episodes by subscribing to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate and review the episodes on Apple Podcasts as it helps others to find the show. We'll be back next week with another in-depth conversation with a pop culture lover. See you then.